terrorism, so I have another question. Recently, President Biden said that white supremacy is the greatest terrorism threat to the American homeland. So, a two-part question. How do you see the threat of domestic terrorism? And what is the FBI doing about these particular threats?
So we have for some time assessed that the domestic terrorist threat is persistent. And in fact, we, I think it was the summer of 2019, July of 2019, elevated racially motivated violent extremism to a national threat priority on the same level with ISIS, for example. And then more recently, we've done the same thing, elevating what we call anti-government, anti-authority violent extremism, which encompasses everything from militia violent extremists to anarchist violent extremists. And I think it's a reflection of the significance of that threat in today's environment. We all too often see people who have turned from angry, hateful rhetoric to violence. And we, to be clear, we, the FBI, do not and will not investigate beliefs, ideology, or rhetoric, no matter how despicable it is. But when those things turn to violence or attempts to commit violence, then we have a responsibility to act, and we will, and we have. And we, in domestic terrorism, in one sense, is not a new thing. You go back to Oklahoma City bombing, for example, and you can go back even further than that. But what is new in today's environment, in many ways, is the role of social media as an accelerant to the threat. So you have now, you've always had angry, disaffected people in this country and in every country, you know, who might be inclined to act on their anger. But in the past, you know, the angry, disaffected guy living in mom's basement, I mean, not there's anything wrong with that, but would just be by himself stewing away. Now, the angry, disaffected guy in one mom's basement is able to communicate with an entire community all over the country of other guys in other basements, and they can egg each other on. And now, you know, the tendency to act on that anger through violence becomes much more real. And, you know, again, we guard very seriously people's First Amendment rights. But there is a right way under the First Amendment to express what you're angry about and who you're angry with. And violence, attempts to commit violence, is just not it. And so we have to act in that situation. And part of what makes this threat so challenging, as well as a sort of similar category of homegrown violent extremism, which we use to describe kind of jihadist-inspired violent extremists here in the United States. What they have in common is you're talking about largely lone actors who are committing attacks through fairly crude means. Think a gun, a knife, a car, a crude IED that you could figure out how to build, you know, off of the internet. And they're picking soft targets, which is just, as you know, sort of intelligence community speak for really any place everyday people are living their everyday lives. And unlike the counterterrorism threat of 9/11, where you have like a sleeper cell and they're planning for years and they're conducting a spectacular attack with a plane crashing into a skyscraper, these are lone actors who don't communicate with a lot of people, don't take a lot of planning to conduct their attacks, could attack almost anywhere and could do it in a very short period of time. So there are not a lot of dots to connect. And so what that means is every dot matters that much more. And so part of what we're trying to do to help prevent those attacks is enlist more and more the help of our state and local law enforcement partners who have eyes and ears in the community, work with community groups, schools, other kinds of organizations, because what you see is that more and more if the person who decides to commit an attack, there was somebody around them, a neighbor, a classmate, a coworker, a family member, who saw something change. And we need that person to be reaching out to law enforcement when they see that change, before it's too late. Everybody's heard that old saying, if you see something, say something. And usually when you hear that, you're picturing what you're supposed to do if you see the backpack in the bus terminal or the airport. Obviously, we want people to say something then too. But here what we're saying is, if you see something about somebody, say something. And that includes if you see something about them saying it online. Sometimes those tips to law enforcement are going to be the key to getting in front of, there may not be that many clues out there, and maybe that clue that could be the key. So that's sort of a description of kind of how we're approaching this. We have our joint terrorism task forces, which tackle both foreign terrorism and domestic terrorism, and they've got both squarely in their sights. We created a domestic terrorism hate crimes fusion cell to try to make sure we're bringing to bear both of those skill sets, and we've actually prevented attacks against, for example, a synagogue in Colorado, just by making sure that, again, we don't have the left-hand, right-hand problem.
Fusion.
Exactly.
No, that's outstanding. Yep. No, that's excellent, Director, and I think that's an important message.